Sometimes the smallest heroes carry the biggest hearts through flames that would break ordinary souls. The abandoned garage on 30th Street in Brooklyn stood like a forgotten tomb against the March sky of 1996. Inside its crumbling walls, Scarlett had made her home, not by choice, but by necessity. The calico stray knew hunger as intimately as she knew the cold concrete beneath her paws. Her ribs showed through patchy fur, and her eyes held the wariness of a creature who had learned that survival meant trusting no one. But everything changed when 5 tiny lives entered her world. The kittens arrived during the harshest winter Brooklyn had seen in years. Scarlett's maternal instincts ignited like a furnace, transforming her from a cautious scavenger into a fierce protector. She would venture into the bitter cold, searching for scraps, returning always to the makeshift nest she had crafted in the garage's darkest corner. Her babies depended on her warmth, her milk, her very existence. Karen Wellen, a firefighter with Engine Company 175, had noticed the stray cat during routine patrols. Something about Scarlett's determined gait caught her attention, the way she moved with purpose through the neighborhood's forgotten spaces. Karen began leaving food near the garage, never knowing that her small acts of kindness were sustaining not just one life, but 6. March 26, 1996, began like any ordinary Tuesday. The morning air carried the scent of awakening spring, but beneath the surface, disaster was brewing. Inside the garage, Scarlett lay curled around her 5 kittens, 3 weeks old and completely helpless. Their eyes had barely opened to see the world that would soon test their mother's courage beyond imagination. At 3:47 p.m., flames erupted. The fire started in the building's electrical system, spreading with terrifying speed through the wooden framework. Smoke filled the air like poisonous fog, and the temperature began its deadly climb. Scarlett awakened to a nightmare. Her sanctuary had become a death trap. Most creatures would have fled. Every instinct screams for self-preservation when faced with such overwhelming danger. But Scarlett was no ordinary creature. She had discovered something more powerful than fear, love that transcends logic. The first kitten was white with gray patches, barely larger than her palm. Scarlett grasped him gently in her mouth and began the treacherous journey through smoke and heat toward the exit. The flames licked at her fur, and her paws burned against the scorching floor, but she pressed forward. One precious life reached safety. She returned immediately for the second kitten. The fire had grown stronger, more vicious. The garage filled with toxic smoke that seared her lungs and blurred her vision. Her whiskers, those delicate sensors that guided her through darkness, began to curl and burn. The pain was excruciating, but Scarlett pushed deeper into the inferno. Another kitten reached safety. By the third rescue, her fur had begun to singe. The heat had become so intense that metal objects glowed red hot. Scarlett's paws left bloody prints on the concrete as she navigated through falling debris. Her eyes, damaged by smoke and heat, could barely see the path ahead. Yet she continued, driven by a force stronger than physical agony. The fourth kitten almost cost Scarlett everything. A burning beam crashed down, missing her by inches. The oxygen was nearly gone, replaced by deadly gases that made each breath a struggle. Her body screamed for her to stop, to save herself while she still could. Instead, she grabbed the fourth baby and stumbled toward the exit, her legs shaking with exhaustion and pain. One kitten remained. The garage had become a furnace. The walls glowed orange, and the air itself seemed to burn. Scarlett's vision was nearly gone, her hearing muffled by the roar of flames. Her paws were raw and bleeding, her face swollen beyond recognition. Any rational creature would have accepted the loss and fled. But love knows no rationality. For the final time, Scarlett entered the blazing structure. The heat was so intense it melted the metal around her. She could barely breathe, barely move. barely think through the overwhelming pain. Yet somewhere in that hellscape was her last baby, and she would not abandon him. She found the kitten in the corner where she had first built their nest. The tiny creature was unconscious from smoke inhalation, but still alive. With the last of her strength, Scarlett lifted him and began the impossible journey back to safety. The garage exploded just as she cleared the doorway. Karen Wellen arrived with her crew to find an extraordinary sight. 5 kittens lay in a neat row on the sidewalk, placed there with deliberate care. Beside them, barely recognizable as a cat, lay Scarlett. Her fur was burned away in patches, her face was swollen shut, and her paws were charred black. She could no longer see her babies, but she could hear their faint mewing, and that sound told her she had succeeded. The veterinarians at the North Shore Animal League gave Scarlett little chance of survival. Her burns covered most of her body, and her injuries were severe beyond what most animals could endure. But they had not accounted for the strength that had carried her through flames 5 times over. For weeks, Scarlett fought for her life. Her recovery was slow and painful, requiring multiple surgeries and constant care. The media discovered her story, and soon letters poured in from around the world. People who had never met this remarkable cat found themselves moved by her sacrifice, inspired by her demonstration of pure, selfless love. Of the 5 kittens, 4 survived to find loving homes. The 5th, weakened by smoke inhalation, passed away despite the best medical care. Scarlett mourned this loss deeply, but she had given each of her babies the greatest gift possible, a chance at life. When Scarlett finally healed enough to see again, her vision was limited and scars marked her body like badges of honor, but her spirit remained unbroken. The North Shore Animal League received over 7,000 adoption applications for Scarlett from people who recognized that they were in the presence of something extraordinary. Karen Wellen, the firefighter who had first noticed Scarlett, became her adoptive mother. In a home filled with love and safety, Scarlett discovered what it meant to be cherished rather than merely surviving. She lived out her remaining years as a beloved pet, her story inspiring countless others to recognize the heroism that exists in the most unexpected places. But Scarlett's legacy extended far beyond her own life. Her story became a symbol of maternal devotion and courage under impossible circumstances. Schools taught children about her bravery, and her image appeared on countless tributes to animal heroes. The North Shore Animal League established an award in her name, recognizing other animals who had shown extraordinary courage. What made Scarlett's actions so remarkable was not just their outcome, but their motivation. She gained nothing from returning to that burning building again and again. Each trip increased her suffering and decreased her chances of survival. Yet she continued because something deeper than self-preservation drove her forward, the same force that compels parents to run into traffic to save their children, that inspires strangers to dive into freezing water to rescue someone they have never met. Scientists might explain Scarlett's behavior through evolutionary biology and maternal instincts. Philosophers might debate the nature of consciousness and whether animals can truly understand sacrifice. But those who witnessed her story understood something simpler and more profound. They had seen love in its purest form, stripped of calculation or expectation, willing to endure any cost for the sake of another. On that March afternoon in Brooklyn, while flames consumed everything around her, a stray cat redefined what it means to be a hero. She showed that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph of love over fear. She demonstrated that the greatest strength often comes in the smallest packages, and that the most profound acts of heroism happen not on battlefields or in movie theaters, but in abandoned garages where nobody is watching except those whose lives hang in the balance. Scarlett passed away in 2008, 12 years after her moment of supreme heroism, but her story continues to echo through time. reminding us that heroes walk among us in forms we might never expect. Sometimes they have 4 legs and whiskers. Sometimes they live in the shadows, forgotten by a world that has no use for strays. And sometimes, when everything seems lost and the flames are closing in, they teach us what it truly means to love without limit. If you enjoyed it, then watch our next video shown on screen.